Welcome to episode 87 of Talking Dairy. I'm your host, Jack McGowan, and joining us is someone who's been steering the ship at DairyNZ for the past year, bringing a fresh perspective from a long career in commercial leadership. Campbell Parker, Chief Executive of DairyNZ. So what has Campbell been getting up to in his first year? What does he bring to the table for dairy farmers, and how does he plan to help us tackle the biggest challenges we face, not just today, but tomorrow as well? Campbell's been leading the charge, and today we're diving into what's working, what's changing, and what the future holds for New Zealand dairy farmers. Stay tuned to hear his take on progressing a positive future for New Zealand dairy farmers. Tēnā welcome Campbell. It's great to have you joining us on Talking Dairy. We'll get into the serious stuff soon, but first could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Thanks, Jack, and thanks for the opportunity to be on this podcast. Look, I grew up on a sheep, beef and dairy grazing property in the Waikato, and I've spent most of my working career involved in the ag sector. During my career, I've had the pleasure of working across many provinces in New Zealand and have a good understanding of some of the different challenges and opportunities that regions face. In a work sense, I'm passionate about two things. Firstly, agriculture, and secondly, leadership. And outside of work, I'm married to Nikki. We've got 3 teenage boys and we live in Hamilton.
Cool. And what do you like to do for fun, Campbell?
I play a little bit of golf when I get time. Kids are getting a little bit older now, but, following a lot of sport with them and we've got a place down at Kinloch and Lake Taupo, and I like to, get on my mountain bike. I like to play golf. I like to get out and try and catch a fish.
A bit of trout fishing?
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't mind sea fishing either when I get the chance.
Same.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've had a long career in commercial roles before joining DairyNZ, with 19 years at Bank of New Zealand, followed by some time at Balance Agri-Nutrients, Waikato Milking Systems, and most recently you were the CEO of GEA. How has this experience helped you bring fresh perspectives to the challenges that dairy farmers are facing right now?
That experience is quite broad, but it's always been in and around agriculture. So when I think about the fresh perspective and I think about industry good, it's really important and a really worthwhile pursuit. So something very different to what I've done. But when you look at other industry good organisations over time, Wool Industries, an interesting one in 2009 when they lost the levy and, that collective investment and the struggles that followed and still exist today. And when you also look over to other countries and you look back in at New Zealand and the fact we have an organisation like DairyNZ, they're often envious of what we have. But I think at the crux of it, dairy farmers want to see value for their levy. And, I've spent a career ensuring, focused on customers and delivering value. And, I now see that customer as being every dairy farmer in New Zealand. So good range of experience, but getting really focused about what does it mean and how do we deliver value for farmers is the key thing for me.
And before you made the leap into the role at DairyNZ, you checked whether you should do it with some farmer friends before applying. What was it that they said to you that made you decide to go for the job?
Yeah, the more I investigated the role, the more excited I got. When I was first, suggested by someone, I kind of went the easy answer, which is, no, I'm very happy doing what I was, and I had a great job, really enjoyed what I was doing. But the more I thought about it and the more I researched, the more excited I got. And then I thought I brought quite a different skill set. So I sense checked that with a very good friend of mine. And off the bat, he said to me, look, give me a couple of days and I'll come back to you. And unbeknown to me, he'd rung a number of farmers and not talked about who I was, but about my background. And he said, here's their numbers and they're all going to encourage you to put yourself forward. So at that time, I'd also been approached by the recruitment firm who was doing the search for the role, and things progressed from there. So
you mentioned that you grew up on a sheep, beef and dairy grazing farm. How did that shape the way that you approach life today?
As a teenager through the 1980s, I learned firsthand kind of the value of $1 after the removal of subsidies. So growing up on a farm, I also lost my father to suicide in 1982 and observed how hard my mother worked to put 3 of us kids through boarding school. She went back part-time teaching and reared up to 400 calves a year by hand. So a strong work ethic was instilled, in my early informative years. And then my last year of high school was 1987, and when the share market crashed and a lot of people said agriculture was a sunset industry, and I suppose what I learned through my time at Massey and the career I followed is I learned that, you really want to follow your passion. You want to do something you care deeply about and take life as an opportunity to learn and grow. And experiences like that, do make you grow up fast and realise life is precious, but you also want to do something that's quite purposeful with your life. So they're lessons that have shaped me and they stay with me today.
Your first year at DairyNZ has been a very busy one. You've really hit the ground running and simultaneously navigated quite a bit of change, kicked off some big projects. How would you sum up your first year at DairyNZ in 3 words?
Refreshing, rewarding, and relationships. So if I go a little bit deeper in that, firstly, getting stuck in with the board to reset the strategy and priorities for DairyNZ has been a big focus. That's seen a significant shift and a clear choice to focus on the future challenges the sector faces while balancing the immediate needs. And the sector does face some big challenges and opportunities on that horizon. But the day-to-day, usual farming challenges remain too. So that's probably the first thing. Secondly, building relationships across the sector with a real focus around trying to reduce duplication. So, I firmly believe that we don't need to do it all as DairyNZ, and working proactively with others to be clear where we're taking the lead as DairyNZ, but equally where others may be a better place to lead on certain subjects. So that's probably the second thing. And thirdly, real reflection for me is that we don't need to tell farmers how to farm. Farmers are very good at doing that. What we need to do is ensure we help them adapt their farm systems so they can remain resilient, profitable and competitive on the world stage. So to do that, farmers have told us that they want us to get back to our core of research and science and our knowledge around farm systems. So that's a lot of where the focus has been in the last 12 months.
And of everything you've done in the last 12 months, what is it that you're most proud of?
DairyNZ's an organisation that a lot comes at it. So, you have to work your way through being clear about the breadth and width of the organisation. But, probably the main thing I'm proud of is, we have reset that strategy. We've got 260 odd people in our organisation and getting them galvanised around that and launching that on the 1st of June. It's still early days around how we bring that to life and some things will look different, but I'm incredibly proud of how hard both the board and the leadership team and the organisation have worked through that process.
Change is always challenging. What has been most challenging?
Look, the economic environment's still a challenge. So you've got farmers out there with, flat to declining income. We've had this inflationary environment. In our business, science and research funding's been drying up. And despite that, we've continued to increase our investment into science and research. So, that's really challenging to balance those things up. And, when you consider that cost inflation on farm, 26% over the last 3 years, we've got a couple of, research farms ourselves, so we're not immune to that. We've had fluctuating GDT and that's starting to make some gains, but we've also had incredibly high, stubbornly costs around things like electricity, debt and interest rates have been hard for farmers too. So, it's been a really challenging environment. The science funding one is more of a challenge. We used to be, kind of 70-30 levy to outside income. We're more like 85 to 15 today. So working hard for how we can leverage the levy and look for other forms of income is a real balancing act. And so we've had to run the rule over our business and cut some costs. We've made some savings in some critical areas, stopped things like TV campaigns. We have reduced our workforce, some vacant roles, and also been through some reorganisation of teams. So that's always difficult, but it's about ultimately amplifying our focus on science, farmer engagement, and the policy work we do as well. And we've ended the year with no debt and flat expenditure. I think we've balanced that reasonably well.
Tell us more about DairyNZ's investment in research and how that's changed over time.
If you look back historically, and I made the reference to the fact that we historically were about 70% levy funded and 30% other forms of commercial income and or, co-funding. That has tightened up a little bit. So, we're now more like 85-15 in terms of our research, and we haven't adjusted our levy since, inception of DairyNZ. So if you look back historically and wanted to benchmark how much investment goes into research and science. If you go back to 2009, we were spending around 26.5 million. And if you look at what we're spending now, we're spending closer to 40 million, 39.7. So, even when you look back pocket inflation rates and adjustments in terms of that, we are continuing to skew more and more of our investment into science and research because, that is the role that we can play really well, and no one else is necessarily doing all of that on behalf of farmers. So, but what we also need to be really clear on is that we don't want to duplicate that science spend. So in our strategy reset, we've been really clear about what role we play in each of those key areas. And I'll touch on one. If you look at reduced greenhouse gas, there's a lot happening in that space with the likes of AgriZero, NZ AGRC, and some of our historic investment that we'd made into vaccines has now been handed over to those entities to take that forward. And our role is to take the commercial research back on products and make sure they can be adapted in the farm system, both physically but also, in context of profitability. So our role is different in that space, for example, in that one area of research that we do.
And I think another thing that to me feels different from what I used to see, I've been here for a while, we're putting in big funding bids that are sort of cross-sector, all of agriculture, a lot of partners rather than just DairyNZ on their own. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, look, it is. I'm actually in Wellington, fly down there tonight, and I'm there tomorrow with the independent assessment panel for 2 funding bids. One for resilient pastures, which is a collaboration across sector, including plant companies, beef and lamb, Fonterra and other parties. And that will be based in Northland if we get that one across the line. And that's really looking at what different types of pasture species do we need, hence resilient pastures, over time to combat climate change. And Northland is the great place to test that out with strong farmer involvement, because the challenges Northland face today is already starting to creep into the Waikato, Bay of Plenty and other regions. So how do we do some of that leading research along with others in funding, including from central government, and getting a collective effort around that? The other one we're working on is around dairy calf opportunities. So strong alignment across the meat companies and meat industry association, beef and lamb, and through the decans, the milk companies and ourselves, to then work with government around, a program to continue to reduce the reliance on bobbies and dairy calf opportunity over time, which if you look globally, that is something that is definitely coming towards us, and we need to have a plan to help farmers. It's quite a big project, research, genetics, the whole piece, as well as developing new markets. So, those types of collaborative efforts are really important, because that's how you get to amplify the levy investment, but also make sure it's a good investment for farmers.
On a personal level, and for DairyNZ as a whole, what does success look like for you?
It's always an interesting question, because how you measure success is incredibly important. But for me, personal success, and I'm driven by being able to try and make a tangible difference. I want to help develop leaders to be the best they can be. You ultimately want to, leave an organisation at some point that will flourish well past your time. So your influence around the culture, how you get that set up, how you get the focus is really important. And that's always been kind of key to my leadership in previous roles and will be in the future. People are at the core of leadership, and trusted relationships also are. So, those 2 pieces will be an incredible, ongoing focus for me. And you measure that, and your work's never done in leadership. So being able to make a difference is the biggest thing that, I kind of get driven by. Success for DairyNZ, looks for me first and foremost about having clear focus on delivering value for every farmer every day. We are an industry good organisation, and our funding comes primarily from the levy that farmers pay us. So we need to make sure that we make the levy the best investment of every New Zealand dairy farmer. And that's actually part of our reset of strategy and our vision now. And that's about ensuring, dairy farmers remain profitable. Profit's a pretty close second to oxygen, because it gives you choices. And, depending on where you are in your farming career, if you're early on, you might have a bit more debt and you want to repay. If you're later, you're thinking about issues like succession. So, you've got to remain profitable. We need to continue to develop science-backed solutions that can be adopted by farmers at the farm systems level. So that's a real important part of what we do. Showcasing what's possible and helping farmers learn from other farmers through our events and extension activities is something that's really important. We are resetting those and having strong and respected partnerships across the sector to help amplify our impact in some of our historic science and research and how that gets used by others is really important as well. So there's a long laundry list and there's probably another couple, but really if I had to boil it right down, it is about farmers seeing value for their levy that they invest in us and we use to help progress a positive future for the sector.
You mentioned resetting events. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so we've made a conscious choice to reset how we do events. We want them to be more impactful and we want to bring scientists back into the field as well. So, again, I go back to when farmers, have talked to me, they've said those couple of things very clearly. When we're at our best, we've got a clear focus on research and science and in that farm systems context and how we bring that back. So the events we're resetting, we want to have a clear purpose around them, a clear focus, and we want to have some of our science and specialist people there to also share that knowledge and stimulate farmer-to-farmer learning. I'm actually going to an event today in Eureka in an hour or so looking forward to getting along there.
Brilliant, yes. And the new events, they do sound very exciting.
I mean, the point I would make, Jack, is, we're trying something new. So it's really important as an organisation. We also learn from that. We won't get it perfect to start with, but our intent is to really dial up, our specialists, play to our strengths and help farmers adapt their farm systems. So that's why we're resetting and how we want to do that. And then in our regions where we've got, and I've had feedback on this, where we've got, challenges in smaller geographies, then we'll have to have some regional nuance around how we do that well because, we can't expect people to travel long distances to some of those events. But we can also use technology and webinars better than we possibly, have in the past as well to bring that science and research back to farmers.
Now, when you were talking about success, I imagine a lot of how you're defining success for DairyNZ is coming from listening to farmers. What have they been telling you?
First of all, I would just say I really enjoy getting out on the road and listening to farmers, and whether that be at shed meetings, in the far north to the deep south, or like today, being at an event in Eureka. Farmers are not shy of giving their views, and we've got 10,500 of them. So that's always great because it shows that they care deeply about their industry. A couple of those strong themes that do keep coming through is, DairyNZ is and has been at its best when it focuses on research and science and farm systems. And while some farmers think we could be doing better in certain areas, the one thing I would also say is there's a strong underlying support for DairyNZ and the work we do. They would like to see us do a better job in telling that story and sharing insights. So that's why we are refocusing those events to have greater impact. We are sharpening, our communication via Dairy News fortnightly, and that's done differently by each region in terms of things that are regionally relevant. And our Inside Dairy publications also currently been reshaped to get that information into the hands of all people that work on dairy farms, not just our levy payers. So they also want to make sure that we're representing them well from the paddock to Parliament. So using our science and research to inform pragmatic and enduring policies. So, in my role, I have that opportunity, of quite a unique perspective. And, I find that keeps me on my toes and focused.
Campbell, you talked about paddock to Parliament, referring to DairyNZ's advocacy on the behalf of farmers. What's DairyNZ's place there and how does it compare to other sector organisations?
The first thing I would say on that is we use our science and research to inform that policy space. So that's really important. And when I talk to either whether it be regional policymakers or central government policymakers, they look to our science and research, and that evidence base has been critical in that process. So that does help set us apart a little bit from others like federated farmers. But what I would say is it's really important we work closely with federated farmers, beef and lamb and others to represent farmers. So from that science and research background, if you look at advocacy this year, we've made made 27 submissions to regional councils about some of the changes in regional council policy. We've made 4 to central government so far this year, and they've all had positive impact on things like getting ag removed from the ETS system. We previously advocated for the split gas approach, which is important. Freshwater farm plans have been paused, and we've been pushing hard on that, but not only about pausing them, making sure that the regulation and that the farm planning process is simplified, and ideally, if you've got an existing farm plan, that can also be used for a regional council process. So, if you're a Fonterra farmer and got a Tiaki farm plan, then that should be able to be used to represent through to the process at a regional council as well. And, we've got well north of 80% of our dairy farmers today have farm plans, so we should use that process. There's changes around the RMA process that we've been pushing hard for, and then we've got the methane target process being reviewed with the independent group that we pushed quite hard for as well. So always, though, from a science and research perspective, and, that to me is advocacy at its finest, and, DairyNZ plays that role well. I think we do have an opportunity to share that a little bit more frequently with our farmers around what we're doing in that space. So you'll see in the revamped Inside Dairy, a regular policy update space as well to try and keep farmers informed.
We're about to submit again, not on environment, but on the review of the Code of Welfare for dairy cattle. So the advocacy is constant.
Yeah, and last time, 2 weeks ago, we submitted on the vocational educational training review. We've got Dairy Training Limited as part of our business, so we input into that process. We've also got the Biosecurity Act review that was announced last week and consultation to the end of November. So there's lots happening in that space, and we've got to be really proactive and work closely with government, and not only government of the day, but across the political spectrum, because what farmers tell me they want is we want enduring policy that's pragmatic, practical and implementable. And so we've got a role to play, across the House with parties that are in opposition as well. And we are doing that.
Right. Yep. That creates more kind of certainty. Farmers can make decisions when they know it's not going to flip-flop back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I spent a long part of my career in banking, as you know, and farmers need to have the confidence to invest and to make the changes they need to. And when they're concerned that we're stuck in a cycle and in 3 years or 6 years' time it could change, that's not good for confidence or investment to make the change that we all need to make.
Before we wrap up and before we do the bonus questions, I just want to check with you if there was anything that we haven't covered that you think you might want to go into more depth.
Probably the only other one is, and I said this a year ago, so I'm coming up a year in the role next week. I was both, humbled and excited to have the opportunity, and I feel exactly the same today. I think there's a lot that we need to build on. We've got a really proud history, and when you look back to things like, DRC at Ruakura, the work we've done over many years, we don't want to lose any of that information. We want to make sure that's available. And I was out 2 weeks ago on a farm where the farmer is using, digital technology more and some of the herding technology that's available. And, when you consider that technology and how they use some of the historic research around leaf stage development, growth, weather stations to predict pasture growth rates, it's pretty exciting to be involved in an industry that, yes, has some challenges, but also has massive opportunities. So, and the work we've done historically is a big part of that. And, we've got to keep making sure that's available to farmers and then make a step change in how we deliver value.
Before we wrap up, we have a bonus round of quickfire questions for you. Snappy answers only, please. Are you ready?
Great.
All right. Coffee or tea?
Coffee first thing in the morning, then tea during the day.
Favourite place in New Zealand?
Kinloch, Lake Taupo.
Best part about dairy farming?
The people and the cows.
Biggest challenge facing dairy farmers?
I think staying positive for the future in a changing world.
Something you can't live without on a farm?
Profit, it gives you choices.
Very good. Most exciting science and research project currently?
It's a difficult one. There's a lot happening and good science we're doing. But if I was to call one out, the work we're doing in the Healthy Waterways program, farmers need multiple tools, and that's probably still our biggest challenge and opportunity domestically.
I'll let you get away with that not snappy answer there. One piece of advice for new farmers.
Reach out to your peers, learn and stay connected, and focus on your goals.
Nice. And one piece of advice for experienced farmers?
Share your wisdom and experience openly.
What's your favourite podcast other than Talking Dairy, of course?
I was going to say I'm a bit of a tragic because they're largely farming shows. So if it's not Talking Dairy, Rubberbank Growing, our future podcast, The Country, Hokanui, and Rural Roundup are things I listen to regularly.
Excellent. That wraps up today's conversation with Campbell Parker. His journey to DairyNZ wasn't just about stepping into a new role. It's involved getting stuck in and navigating big challenges, driving innovation and listening to farmers to make a real difference. It's clear he's had a full-on first year leading DairyNZ, and there's a lot happening behind the scenes that directly impacts us on farm. From key partnerships to big challenges of the future, it's good to know there's a focus on making sure we've got the right support where it counts. If you want to learn more, check out the resources in today's show notes. Mā te wā, mauri ora. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Talking Dairy. Make sure to hit follow so you can keep up to date with our latest episodes. You can also keep up with DairyNZ News on Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn, or go to our website and sign up for our fortnightly DairyNZ News emails. As always, if you have any feedback on this podcast or have some ideas for future topics or guests to have on the show, please email us at talkingdairy@dairynz.co.nz. Mā te wā, mauri ora, catch you next time.